Welcome, higher education professionals, to this explainer. Look, if you teach, you know the struggle. Staring down that overwhelming, mountain-sized pile of grading at the end of the semester is pretty daunting. And that is exactly why multiple-choice questions are so beautifully, wonderfully efficient. But actually writing fair, rigorous questions that empower your students to show what they know, well, that's incredibly difficult. It's a true skill, it takes practice, and that is exactly what we're going to be focusing on today.
Because here's the harsh reality. A poorly written multiple-choice question doesn't actually assess what your student knows. Instead, it frustrates them. It usually ends up just testing their reading comprehension, or honestly, their ability to guess, rather than their actual mastery of the content. It completely fails to assess higher-order thinking. We want to fix that, right? Because our ultimate goal is to empower our students, not trick them.
So, here is our syllabus for this explainer. We'll cover 1. The anatomy of an MCQ. 2. Rules for the STEM. 3. Crafting plausible alternatives. 4. Moving beyond memorization. And finally, 5. The final MCQ checklist.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the anatomy of an MCQ. Let's get our shared vocabulary established.
Every standard multiple-choice question consists of 3 main parts. First up, you have the STEM, which is just the question or the incomplete statement itself. Next is the key, and that's your correct or best answer. And finally, the distractors, which are all those incorrect options. Collectively, the key and the distractors are simply referred to as the alternatives.
Now, if you remember literally only one thing about question structure, please let it be the golden rule of the STEM. The STEM should be meaningful by itself and present a definite problem. So what does this mean in practice? It means a well-prepared student should be able to read just the STEM and roughly anticipate the correct answer before their eyes even glance down at the alternatives.
To put that into perspective, consider a poor STEM like, which of the following is true? This tells the student absolutely nothing about the actual problem. They're forced to read every single alternative just to figure out what topic you're even asking about. Now, a better STEM asks a highly specific question. According to the theory of relativity, what happens to time as an object approaches the speed of light? See the difference? The problem is definite and completely clear.
All right, moving to Section 2, Rules for the STEM. If you happen to have a draft exam nearby, definitely pull it out so you can follow along.
The crucial point here is to eliminate extraneous material. If your STEM reads like a mini lecture, like John Stuart Mill, heavily influenced by Jeremy Bentham, wrote extensively about utilitarianism, well, it just has way too much backstory. Don't use your exam STEM to teach a lesson or give unnecessary context. Keep it remarkably concise. Just ask the direct question, what is the core principle of utilitarianism?
Our next rule, avoid negative phrasing whenever you possibly can. Negative words completely confuse students when they're under the intense pressure of taking an exam. But, if you absolutely must use words like not, except, or least, you have to boldly capitalize them. You want to make it virtually impossible for the student to miss that negative condition.
Actually, I want to challenge you right now to perform a quick STEM audit on your own work. Take 3 to 5 questions from one of your existing exams. Physically cover up the alternatives with your hand. Now, ask yourself, can you understand the core problem from the STEM alone? If the answer is no, it's time to rewrite it. And definitely take a quick moment to convert any confusing, negatively phrased STEMs into positive statements.
Moving right along, Section 3, Crafting Plausible Alternatives.
Let's just validate something you probably already know. Writing the correct answer, the key, is super easy. Writing plausible distractors, that is absolutely the hardest part of creating a great multiple-choice question. The number one rule here is that alternatives must be plausible. If you're asking who the first U.S. president was and your distractors are Mickey Mouse and a pineapple, you aren't testing knowledge, you're just giving away free points. Good distractors should represent common student misconceptions or legitimate historical errors. Make them work for it.
Alternatives also have to be mutually exclusive. They really cannot overlap. Think about it. If you ask for the length of a typical bachelor's degree and your options are 1 to 3 years or 3 to 5 years, well, a 4-year degree makes both of those technically correct. That is a total nightmare for grading. Always ensure your timeframes, numbers, and categories are completely distinct and non-overlapping.
And this brilliantly illustrates how students are incredibly savvy at gaming tests if you aren't careful. For instance, you've got to watch out for uneven lengths. Instructors very often make the correct answer the longest option because they want it to be perfectly 100% accurate. Trust me, students spot this pattern immediately. Also, avoid using all of the above. Why? Because if a student knows options A and B are right, they'll just guess all without even knowing anything about option C. And none of the above is heavily flawed too, mostly because it only tests what a student knows the answer isn't, rather than what it actually is.
Okay, Section 4, moving beyond memorization. Let's tackle the biggest myth in multiple choice testing head-on.
The big myth is that these questions can only test basic rote memorization. It simply isn't true. Well-crafted questions can absolutely test higher-order thinking, effectively moving up Bloom's taxonomy straight into application and analysis. You can do this using 3 very specific strategies. Number 1, scenarios and case studies. 2, interpretive material, like charts or quotes. And 3, asking for the best answer.
Let's see how this transforms a real-world question. Instead of just asking for a dictionary definition of confirmation bias, which really only tests memory, use a mini narrative. The application question presents a stubborn investor ignoring terrible news about his supply chain and clinging desperately to one single positive press release. Identifying the bias in this scenario proves the student actually understands how the concept works out in the real world.
Another powerful technique is the best answer format. A standard question might just ask, which test should be ordered? But in the real world of, say, nursing, maybe all of those tests will be ordered eventually. By asking, which test is the most immediate priority for the triage nurse, you force the student to evaluate and carefully weigh competing, plausible options against each other. It's a much, much deeper level of assessment.
Finally, we've arrived at Section 5, the final MCQ checklist. Consider this your ultimate tool for assessment design. Before you finalize any multiple-choice exam, I really want you to run all your future drafts through these specific checks. First up, the STEM check. Can the STEM be answered without even looking at the options? Is it clean and entirely free of irrelevant teaching information? And if you absolutely had to use negative words like not or except, are they used sparingly and clearly emphasized with capitalization?
Next, run the alternatives check. Ask yourself, are your distractors doing the heavy lifting? Meaning, are they truly plausible to an unprepared student? Are your options mutually exclusive with zero overlap? And are they similar in length so you don't accidentally give away the key? Have you completely eliminated all of the above and none of the above? And finally, do a significant portion of your questions test actual application or analysis rather than just basic recall? I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought today. As you look at your own syllabi and assessments moving forward, ask yourself honestly, do your questions truly test content knowledge, or are they really just testing reading comprehension? Look, writing great questions is hard work, for sure, but it is absolutely the best way to empower your students and genuinely measure their success. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy writing.